Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show a really brilliant and brutal game that was played in 1965 between Dragoljub Minic and Albin Planinc. So the hero of our story today is the player with the black pieces, Albin Planinc, and I came to this idea to make this video because today I was working my day shift and one of my followers he texted me on my YouTube chess channel. If he wrote to me that I should probably publish some games played by Albin Planinc because he was really a brilliant player. And then I started to study his games more, and I really analyzed now many of his games at home, and I found this beauty. It was in my opinion one of the best games played by Albin Planinc. It was really such a beautiful tactical game which spreads really all over the board, and it's one of these games where you have to include all of your pieces in the attack. I of course like many tactics to see. You have really great combinations, maybe with the rook and the knight. You have a great combination with the queen and the rook or something. So but sometimes a pawn can be really dangerous, and in this particular game you'll see I think one of the most badass pawns in chess history. Even I think this is really something that you not see so often in chess games. So what to say about Albin Planinc? He was a Slovenian Yugoslavian grandmaster from the last century. He was really strong, and in many chess article many have written that Albin Planinc tried to spice up the game by always playing sort of a dubious opening. He played really recklessly, and many times he got a bad position in the beginning of the game, but then through his tactical possibilities he came out in the middle game with some great performances, and he outplayed many great players, although he had positions like -2, -3. So he was a sharp tactician who could always surprise you in the middle game stage. So unfortunately Albin Planinc suffered from depression, and then he never came back, and in 2008 he died. But still he is living, I think, in the chess world and in the chess community through his beautiful games, and there are plenty really sick brutal games by Albin Planinc, and in the near future of course on my YouTube chess channel we'll cover more of his games. So let's check out now this beauty. Be prepared, put your seatbelts on. This is simply different chess. So here Dragoljub Minic played the move e4. We have now e5 by Planinc. We have knight to f3, and here after move knight to c6, bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez is on the board. And don't worry, of course the Ruy Lopez can be really a positional struggle, a positional battle, but not in this game. Here the Ruy Lopez will be played in sort of a King's Gambit style. So here after move bishop to b5, we have now the move a6, the more free defense, bishop to a4, and now after move knight to f6, of course we're challenging now the pawn in the center of the board. And most of the times white is going into this particular line because white played on a fast development, and you see now in the continuation of the game black still needs at least two tempi in order to secure the king. Of course you can take knight takes e4 is also perfectly fine, but then it leads into a complicated line. I think it's a more open game for both sides, where d4 is opening the center, and of course it's also something worth to study. So but we're not analyzing I think too much theory today. After move castling, here we have the normal idea, bishop to b5, and now after move bishop to b3, again you can play bishop to e7, which would be now the closed Ruy Lopez, or you can play even I think bishop to c5 is perfectly fine, and then secure the king by castling. But here Albin Planinc played already a provocative variation, which is now the so-called Archangel Variation. This Archangel Variation is named after a town in Russia, and you see now the bishop to b7 move is really I think a provocative move because you delayed castling, and that's the most important thing to notice here, because in chess when you play development you want to secure the king by castling, and still in the near future you can always play the move bishop to b7. But here in my opinion it is really a provocative variation because now you're teasing your opponent a little bit, I think, as black here, because now when white is thinking about this position he's saying to himself, okay, he played now bishop to b7, he still hasn't calculated, I can include my rook into the game, I can include maybe my knight into the game, so probably the best way to beat black here is to open the center. And that's why here Dragoljub Minic Minić played now immediately d4 after knight to d4. There is now really a sick and pervert line, I think, that many top grandmasters have played, and I think it's also something worth to study, because now the actual best continuation here for white is to move bishop to f7. It's now really a line that has been played very often in top grandmaster level. It is a complicated line because after king to f7 you have this one, knight to e5, and then you have to hide your king here to g8. This wasn't played in the game, but I wanted to show you how sharp already this position can be. And therefore move king to g8, the main line would be something like queen to d4, but nothing went wrong here for black, believe me or not, because although it seems so that the king is stuck here on the square g8, still black can make progress, first of all with the move c5, and we can notice now the e4 pawn is weak, and then after something like queen to d1 we can still play queen to e7, queen to c7, whatever you like, and attack the knight and still recapture then the pawn on e4. And when that happens, still you then have opportunities to push the pawn on d5, and then you would have, I think, a dominant position in the center of the board. So that's why I think it's something really worth to study. This wasn't played in game, as I said, but nothing went wrong here, believe me, for black, because although maybe black is vulnerable a little bit on light squares here, but white doesn't have any more the light square bishop. This is a great protector of light squares, so that's why here the evaluation is also already slightly better for black, which is really well. So probably bishop to f7 would be playable, but here Dragoljub Minić instead of that played knight to d4, and here after move e takes d4, the problem is now that queen to d4 is actually already sort of an inaccuracy, because then you play c5, and now after move queen to e5, which is the only move to save your bishop because c4 is the threat, then queen to e7, after queen to e7, bishop to e7, and still you have worries with this bishop, and then in the continuation of the game you lose this very important centralized pawn. Then d5 is happening, and then queenside castling is possible, kingside castling is possible with this central pawn storm, with the potential d5 pawn, and with this space advantage on the queen side, black could have, of course, a beautiful and dominant game. So that's why after move here e take d4, Dragoljub Minić tried now to spice up the game and played now the move e5. Here knight to e4 was played. Again, queen to d4 is not working because of the same tactic. After move c5, now the queen to e5 move is simply not working, so you have to retreat, and then with the move c4 the bishop gets trapped, and it's game over here for black, so for white, pardon me. So after move knight to e4, Dragoljub Minić tried up to spice out the game here. He tried now the move c3. What he was hoping for is that black takes, and then he comes out with this knight very actively, knight to c3, and then the knight on e4 would be challenged. But here Albin Planinc played, I think, a beautiful move, d3, passing through, because okay, I will lose my pawn, but I'm not giving you the natural square for your knight. You're not coming with your knight on the best square on the board. So that's why after move d3 we have queen to f3. Dragoljub Minić sense that his queen cannot be endangered here, because first of all the bishop is hanging, and if you play something immediately like knight to c5, this is not working because of the checkmate on f7. So that's why this discovered attack is simply not working immediately. You have to first secure the king. So here Planinc played queen to e7, protecting the f7 square. We have now knight to d2, challenging the knight, and the problem is if you play knight to d2, then of course queen to b7 is going to happen. The rook is hanging, the bishop is the knight is hanging, so it's simply a lost game then for white. So after move here knight to d2, now actually the best move would be the move knight to c5. This is a move I think that would equalize the game for both sides. Here in the continuation, maybe bishop to d5 would be the continuation. This was also not played in the game, but that was actually the suggested line here. After move bishop to d5, bishop to d5, here queen to d5, and now with rook to d8, or maybe even c6 is the possibility. Black is, I think, solved now all of the positional problems. Then in a couple of more moves we can even, I think, queenside castling, and there are 4 games that I see in the database, and now no winning game here for white. So in my opinion, black gets out of this mess, and you see now with the move knight to c5 we have also our protection of the d3 square. And I'm sure that Albin Planinc was familiar with this particular line. But instead of this move, knight to c5, he played now really a brutal move. He played now queenside castle. He sacrifices the knight. He sensed now that white is lacking a little bit in development because the bishop is not out, the rook is not out, still this rook connection is bad, so the rook are not connected. And okay, here Dragoljub Minic accepted the challenge, and here already white has a slightly advantage because here white can defend its position, although there is now the threat after move queen to e5. Now the serious threat is the move f5, and then the knight could get trapped. So that's why Dragoljub Minic played the only good move here, rook to e1, getting the rook on the same file where already the queen is. But the problem is the lack of the rook connection. The rook connection is a very important stage of the opening, and you see now there are maybe some tactical ideas, but now if you move, for instance, the knight, then the rook could be hanging. But the problem for black here is that the discovered attack by the knight to d6 comes with the check against the king. And my father always used to say when we play chess, he said that the check is always older than the other threat. So that's why here knight to d6 would come with a beautiful check against the king, and then the queen could be hanging. So in the continuation, here f5 was played anyway by Albin Planinc, and now queen to g3. This is perfectly fine. White is trying now to simplify the game, hopes for trades of queens, queen to g3, and then knight to g3, and white is continuing the game with an extra piece. But that's not what Albin Planinc's plan was. He played now queen to e8, again a provocative, really brutal move here by black. So after move queen to e8, you can guess what happens. We have knight to d6. This was now the tactical motif that we have discussed, and after move bishop to d6, the game becomes really wild. You could maybe try here instead of that, you can maybe try some ideas like c takes d6, but the queen is hanging. What should you do? If you move the king, then again it's a huge problem. So the only move is here bishop to d6, and here the continuation we have a rook to e1, rook takes e8, and the problem is now if you play a bishop takes g3, then of course white can also create this check. Rook takes d8, after king to d8, now white can grab this bishop on g3, and white is continuing the game with an extra piece. This should be probably winning. The evaluation here's already something like +3 for white. So that's why after move rook takes e8, here Albin Planinc sacrificed the queen and played now a beautiful move, rook to e8. And now comes the critical moment of the game for white. So far white played, I think, a couple of inaccurate moves in an early stage of the game, in the opening, and the only way to cover yourself is to play the move f4, which Dragoljub Minic unfortunately didn't play, because here after move f4 there is no check on e1. That's now the most important thing to recognize. The only way that black can make some kind of a progress here is to play bishop to c5, then king to f1 has to be played, and now with the rook to e2 we're threatening also now to take out here on g2. In the continuation maybe bishop to e8 can be played, and now with a check white would probably take out here the bishop. After rook takes g2, king to g2 now, and rook to e8 would be the possible continuation. Still white is much better, but I think maybe this is playable because we have to agree, I think, that this is really a wild position in which black has now all of the pawns on the board. So still black has all of the 8 pawns on the board. So maybe if black manages to do something like bishop to b6, and then to play something like c5, c4, maybe to support somehow this pawn on d3, then this position can be also very dangerous for white. But I think that white can regroup. White would find a way, I think, to activate his pieces, because the problem is now both of these bishops are cutting off the most important squares. Now bishop to d2 would be probably the continuation, then the rook cannot come somehow on the first or second rank in white's position. So, but as I said, f4 would be a normal move here for white, but unfortunately here Dragoljub Minic played now the move bishop to f4, and now really Albin Planinc will show really his cards. He's showing now his beautiful tactical possibilities. He plays now a beautiful move d2, and now this is one of the most annoying pawns that you see probably probably in some chess game, this really badass pawn, because the serious threat is the move rook to e1. Rook to e1, if that happens, then of course we can recapture after rook takes e1, d takes e1, and then we promote to a new queen, and it's a checkmate. So you cannot do so many things now, so that's why here the only move that helps you out is the move rook to f1. In the continuation of the game, Albin Planinc played rook to e1 anyway, because of this one, rook takes e1, so here d takes e1, and again this is game over. But after move rook to e1, here bishop to d6 was played, which again wasn't the best of moves. The problem about this particular position is that you are getting rid of, you're not attacking anymore this pawn on d2. But the problem is now, even if you take bishop takes d2, then of course you lose the queen. The only way to make some kind of progress is to play here queen to h4 to get out of this mess, to get out of this x-ray attack by the bishop against the queen on g3. This was the only move that could prolong the game a little bit for white. This is the only defensive move, but after move bishop to d6, we have now this stunner rook to e8. And here Albin Planinc sacrificed another piece. He gave up the bishop, but now he included his rook into the game. And again, the serious threat is rook takes f1. After move king to f1, then rook to e1. Again, this would be a checkmate. So that's why f3 here played by Dragoljub Minic. He is creating at least the breathing spaces now, and now comes a beautiful stunner by Albin Planinc. Maybe you can pause now the video and try to see now the best continuation here for black. It's maybe hard to see, but it's a beautiful tactical motif. I hope you can find it, because it's very important now to be very active. If you play one single passive move, I think you lose the game here for black. So that's why you have to be accurate, and that's the beauty of the game, because Albin Planinc played after a dubious maybe knight sacrifice, but then from that point on he played really Mikhail Tal, Rashid Nejmedinov moves, I don't know, Paul Murphy moves. From this point on he played now really sick brutal chess. So here after move f3, the best move actually is a beautiful deflection motif, bishop to d5, because the bishop on b3 is really annoying. It's controlling the square d1. If you take of course bishop to d5, then this is the problem. Rook takes f1, king to f1, and now you have this promotion on d1, and it's simply game over. So that's why the bishop cannot go back, the bishop cannot be improved. Even if you try here something like here bishop to c2 in order to stay on this diagonal and control the d1 square, then you get bishop to c4, and the problem is now the rook is attacked, and it's something that white should resign. So that's why here after move bishop to d5, in the continuation Dragoljub Minic played queen to f4, attacking now the d2 pawn. But now again a beautiful deflection motif, again with the same idea, but now the rook is also under fire. So here in the continuation of the game, white needed to do something. White needed to somehow improve the position. The problem is now you have to create escape routes for your king. There are now two ways. King to f2 is a possibility, or maybe to play the move h4. In the continuation of the game, Dragoljub Minic played the move h4, but even if you play king to f2, it's not even better, because the rook to f1 happens. Then you have to play something like king to g3. Then we have a promotion. Here white has to sacrifice now the bishop. Here after move rook to d1, maybe you can try something like this, b3 kicking with the bishop, but now with rook takes d6, and here after b takes c3, still it's such a complicated game here for white because of this move, rook to e2, and now the threat is of course rook to g6, and you could lose a very important pawn here on g2. You could run also into some beautiful checkmate patterns. So this was the continuation. For instance, if you play king to f2, which was a slightly better continuation, this was maybe some kind of an idea to hang on to this position somehow here for white, but white is here much worse. Here Dragoljub Minic tried to move h4, which was now a suicide mission, because after move rook to f1 we have king to h2, and now this is a beautiful move. Now Albin Planinc included all of the pieces into the game, and the problem is, again I'm pointing out, bishop takes c4 is not working because of this beautiful promotion on d1. So you see, the queen is there, the bishop is there, but you don't have time to take out, for instance, this pawn on c7, because rook to f2 is going to happen. Now we're creating this beautiful battery here on the second rank. You can maybe play something like queen to d6, but you get checked here. Rook to g2, then you have to move your king. Then we play this one. This would be, of course, winning, even if you try something like, I don't know, queen to h1. Then we can play queen takes h2, king to h2, and now with the move, first we take, of course, the bishop, and then the next couple moves we play simply bishop to e2 and promote here to a new queen. The only way to defend this position is to play bishop to d1, but now with this 4 versus 3 situation here, with this 3 versus 2 situation, white is simply lost in its potential endgame. So that's why you see after move rook to h2, here in the continuation of the game, you cannot give up the queen anymore. You have to run with your king. King to g3 was played by Dragoljub Minic, but now rook to g2, a check. Now rook to h4, and now king to f5. Now this was the move that Albin Planinc played, rook to h6, and in this position, believe me or not, Dragoljub Minic resigned. Why did he resign? Because let's see now possible continuations. If you play, for instance, something like queen to f8, if you try maybe one check, okay, you had your fun with your one check, but now there are no good checks we can always cover. Even if you play queen to c5, then rook to c6 can happen. So there is not a good way how to defend this position anymore, and in the continuation of the game, the promotion is still working here for black. The only way maybe that you could try here is to the prolonged game is to maybe to play queen to d4 to stay on this file in order to protect this potential promotion, but it's not working because of this one. A rook to h5 is going to happen, and the problem is now you don't have good squares for the king. You have to run on the same file where already the queen is. That's the most important thing to recognize, and then in the continuation you lose the queen, because you could maybe try something like here king to e4, but now bishop takes b3, we have a takes b3 as a possibility, and now this is the stunner, a rook to e2. You have to move your king somewhere. If you move the king, of course, to d3, then we have a new promotion and it's game over. But now you have to run here on f4, and after rook to h4, you cannot cover anymore with the bishop, because here when the king was on e4, then you could cover with the move bishop to f4. But this was the stunner, the potential stunner, rook to e2. You have to run with your king to f4, and now rook to h4. You have to step back. You lose the queen, and here black is going to promote a new queen, and it's game over. So as I said, after move rook to h6, here in this position, Dragoljub Minic resigned. So this was sick, brutal chess, really wild stuff. I really enjoyed the game, and I wanted to thank my follower under the name Neo. He texted me today and he suggested to me some games by Albin Planinc. I wanted to thank him because I knew who he was, but I never really analyzed his games. I really never knew that he played so beautiful games, really wild stuff. So again, thank you for posting me about Albin Planinc. I'm really glad that I can really study now his games more, because he is really a great tactician. And I've also seen, for instance, there is a game between Albin Planinc and Miguel Naidoo, so we'll cover that game for sure. So there are plenty games that Albin Planinc played, and they are really beautiful chess games. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game like I did, and if you want to see some more sick and brutal games like this, check out my best chess games of all time series with some beautiful and immortal tactics. And if you want to see maybe even wilder games, check out my commented chess games played by computers with some games played by Stockfish, Alpha 0, Lila 0, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.